June 29th, 1983. A pond at a Louisiana amusement park. 3 boys go under. Someone on the bank asks Joe Delaney if he can swim. "I can't swim good," he says, "but I've got to save those kids." He goes in. He doesn't come back up.
As Joe Delaney, star running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, drowned trying to rescue a child.
What kind of person does that? And did the NFL ever really see who Joe Delaney was? Joe Delaney was born in Henderson, Texas in 1958. He was the third of 8 children, in a family that didn't have much and wasn't expecting much to change. They moved to Houghton, Louisiana while Joe was still young. That's where his father, Woodrow, drove a cattle truck for a living, and made one thing clear early on. Football wasn't a career. It was a distraction, and his son wasn't going to waste his time chasing one. Joe played anyway. He lined up at wide receiver at Houghton High School, fast enough off the line that track coaches wanted him as badly as the football coaches did. But the position that made him famous wasn't even the one he was recruited to play. At Northwestern State, the running back started getting hurt early in his freshman year, and instead of staying quiet and protecting his own spot, Joe walked up to his coach and offered to switch. Not because anyone asked him to, because the team needed someone to. "I promised him he could play receiver," his coach said years later. "Then we had a few injuries, and Joe came to me and said if we needed a running back, he'd switch." That was Joe D., which is what people around Houghton called him, because his full name almost felt too formal for who he actually was. He tutored younger kids in athletics the way an older brother would. No charge, no mention of it afterward. When a teacher who had once helped him passed away and her family couldn't cover the funeral, Joe paid for it himself, quietly enough that most people only found out after the fact. But what Joe Delaney did next is something no one would have expected. He built a small 2-bedroom brick house near his widowed mother and kept driving the same baby blue Cougar he'd bought as a rookie. The first fine thing he'd ever owned, and he told his wife he'd never get rid of it. The NFL saw a 5'10", 184-pound running back from a Division I AA school nobody outside Louisiana had heard of. A project and nothing more. But everyone in Houghton already knew exactly what he was, and they had watched him live it for years without needing a scouting report to tell them so. Did the NFL ever see what Houghton saw? Kansas City got their answer fast. Delaney's first NFL game was in New England in 1981, off the bench, and he walked away with 101 rushing yards before most of the league had even learned how to say his name. A week later came his first start against Oakland. 106 rushing yards and 104 yards receiving in the same afternoon. Then came Denver on October 18th. He broke off a 75-yard touchdown run that got called back for a penalty, the kind of call that would have rattled most rookies. But what Delaney did on the very next play stunned everyone watching. Same drive, 82 yards, untouched. The longest rushing play in the entire NFL that season. 3 weeks after that, against Houston, he ran for 193 yards in a single game, a franchise record that still stands today. Elvin Bethea, Houston's defensive end and a future Hall of Famer, wasn't reaching for words when it was over. "I've played against the best. O.J. Simpson, Gale Sayers, Walter Payton. He ranks right up there with them. He is great with a capital G." That was a Hall of Famer putting a 22-year-old rookie in the same sentence as the greatest running backs who ever played the game.
Ron Brown, Darrell Green as the fastest guys in the NFL. I tell you what, I would put Joe against any of them.
Kansas City hadn't had a winning season since 1973. Delaney's rookie year ended that drought. 1,121 yards, 4 franchise records, a 9-7 finish that nobody in August had believed was possible. He was named AFC Rookie of the Year and made the Pro Bowl, all at 22 years old. The Chiefs that existed before him already felt like a completely different franchise. Was this the player Kansas City was finally going to build something real around? Everything in that first season pointed in one direction. This was supposed to be the beginning of something. And then, almost without warning, it stopped. The NFL players went on strike and cut the 1982 season to 8 games. A detached retina and the surgery to repair it cost him several of those. Kansas City fell to 3-6, and the conversation around Delaney quietly shifted from what he already was to what he might still become. By the summer of 1983, he was healthy again, 24 years old, with a third season ahead of him and the Chiefs building their offense back around his shoulders. The league was finally starting to catch up to what Houghton had known for years. So what does a fully healthy Joe Delaney, 24 years old, in the prime of his career, look like in his third NFL season? On June 29, 1983, Monroe, Louisiana, it felt like any other summer afternoon. A community day at Critters Creek, friends nearby, a softball game going on in the background, the kind of day that gives no warning about what it's about to become. Near the park sat a pond nobody had built for swimming, leftover construction water, 6 feet deep, never intended for anyone to swim in. 3 boys went in thinking it was shallow. It wasn't. Within seconds, they were in trouble. Joe saw it from the field. He wasn't a swimmer, and he knew that about himself better than anyone near him did. You know that feeling when something goes wrong so fast that your body doesn't move before your mind does? That split second where you're just frozen, watching, before anything in you decides what to do? Most of the people on that bank had that moment. Someone finally asked if Joe could swim because somebody had to. Because 3 kids were going under and nobody had moved yet. Joe didn't have that moment. He answered and he went in. 11-year-old Lancer Perkins was pulled from the water alive and died in the hospital the next morning. 11-year-old Harry Holland Jr. died at the scene. Joe Delaney, 24 years old, never came back up.
It was about 6 foot deep, and 2 of them didn't come up, but the third one did come up. He ran to the bank and yelled for help, and Joe Delaney was one of them. And as he heard the young child yell for help, well, he came running. Well, he jumped in the water in an attempt to save him, and he didn't come up either.
Every account of that afternoon circles back to the same detail. He knew he couldn't swim, and that's not a fact that makes what he did more tragic. That's the whole answer. He weighed those odds, didn't like them, and went in anyway, because the alternative was standing on a bank and watching. The news reached Kansas City that evening. Teammates, coaches, and an entire locker room that had spent 2 seasons building itself around a 24-year-old running back, all finding out the same way people find out about things that don't seem real yet. He left behind his wife Carolyn and 3 daughters, a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 4-month-old. A story like that should have stayed local. A tragedy one small Louisiana town quietly carried on its own. It didn't stay local. Not even close. 3,000 people packed into the gymnasium at Houghton High School on July 4th. In heat so brutal that mourners had to be carried outside and revived on the lawn.
Joe now is still a hero and always will be. We will miss Joe Delaney. We will never forget him.
Norma Hunt, wife of Chiefs owner Lamar Hunt, made the trip down from Kansas City to sit with the family. And after the service, a 2-mile procession of cars followed the casket to the cemetery. 11 days later, Vice President George H.W. Bush stood in that same gymnasium and presented the Presidential Citizens Medal on Reagan's behalf. The citation read, "By this supreme example of courage and compassion, this brilliantly gifted young man left a spiritual legacy for his fellow Americans." That wasn't the only honor, and this is the part that almost nobody talks about. Louisiana's governor presented the family a state award for civilian bravery that same week, and the following year, the NCAA gave Delaney its Award of Valor. Then came the one most people have never heard of, the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission, the body created specifically to recognize civilian life-saving heroism. Fewer than 10,000 medals awarded in over a century of existence, and Joe Delaney earned one. Let that sit for a second. 14 years after that, in 1997, he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, recognition for what he had already done on the field long before that summer afternoon. 4 institutions, years apart, all arriving independently at the same conclusion about who this man was. And still, somehow, most people have never heard his name. So how does a name like that go quiet for 30 years? Kansas City did what it could. The Chiefs wore a patch for the entire 1983 season, a gold eagle over the number 37, and no player has worn that number since, though it was never formally retired. He went into the team's Ring of Honor, one of only a few players in franchise history inducted posthumously, and a sports media outlet created an annual award in his name, given each year to a running back who plays with character character to match his talent. Not an official league honor, but a sincere one, repeated every year by people who hadn't forgotten. And then, for a long time, that's where it stayed confined. To Louisiana, to Kansas City, to a college campus in Natchitoches, known deeply by the people closest to him and almost nowhere else. A foundation set up early to fund swimming lessons in his name quietly ran out of support and folded. The kind of ending that happens to good intentions when nobody keeps funding them. A documentary short in 2015 finally put his name back in front of a national audience. 5 years after that, a monument went up at the park where he died. Still not enough. Then, in 2021, a stretch of highway in Kansas City was dedicated in his name on June 29th, the 38th anniversary of the day he died. Today, the Delaney 37 Foundation, run by his widow and daughters, funds swimming lessons in the same kind of community he died trying to save. A circle that took nearly 40 years to close. He was buried with a football in his arms. His tombstone reads, "Greater love has no man than to lay down his life for another." The NFL spent 2 seasons measuring what Joe Delaney could do with a football. Houghton, Louisiana never needed the measurements. They already knew the man. So here's the question worth sitting with. Why does it take 30 years and a documentary for a man like that to become part of the conversation at all? Joe Delaney answered that question long before anyone thought to ask it. What happened at that pond didn't change who he was. It just showed everyone else what Houghton already knew.
He didn't try to be anything more than what he was. He was himself. He was a football player. He was good people, man. I think a lot of people appreciate him because of that.
If this story moved you, hit super thanks. It's the fastest way to tell me these stories are worth telling. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe, because we have more coming your way.